But with Bitcoin, actually, you can care about everything.
When we say defund violence, like we need different solutions. Hey, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome to this week's Monday Night Bitcoin. My name is Brian.
And I am George. Welcome. Today, we want to talk a little bit about a couple different topics, but I want to kick things off by visiting this trending topic of defunding police. Have you seen this, Brian?
I have it. It's deep. We're kicking off deep.
So what are your thoughts? When you see that hashtag trending, you see people talking about it, sort of from your perspective, what do you hear?
So I hear that we were onto something last week when we were talking about defunding violence, but it sounds like people are saying it a little bit different than how we said it. But I'm coming at this from a place of optimism. Like, I don't think, not that I fully agree with everything that's being said, but I'm coming at this from a place of optimism that I'm excited that people are looking for new solutions. Like, there's no doubt that even just the words defund police sound very radical and sound crazy. Like, you're going to call the other person radical. You're going to call them crazy. You're going to immediately go to just wherever your gut response is to just even hearing that based on, maybe what political party you're in or just what part of the country you live in. Like, there's no way to hear someone else say that or even hear us kicking off with that and just immediately kind of be at your keyboard or be at your phone ready to retort with what you want to. And so with that, I can't imagine anything else we'd be talking about because we need to hit on it.
Right. Yeah, and it was interesting because defund police does sound very radical. It sounds very extreme, and we could probably make the argument either way, but I think it kind of misses the point that we were trying to get out with defund violence, because when we say defund violence, we're getting back to the economic issue itself, not some sort of political agenda or motivation, right? We're actually talking about the fact that violence is funded through easy money, through just the printing of money that just falls into the hands of governments, and it trickles down into local police departments. And when you are a police force, let's say, and you have easy access to money, you're gonna beef up your crew. You're gonna buy a helicopter maybe, or a tank or whatever. And so what we need to do is defund the excess that really is responsible for what's happening in the streets, where you're seeing police be as aggressive as they're being with their own citizens.
Right. Like, there's so much happening above a police officer on the ground making either, right decisions or wrong decisions. There's so much above them happening. Like, city budgets, federal budgets, politicians making laws, and then money printers funding this whole bureaucracy, this whole institution all the way down. And so when we say defund violence, like we need different solutions. Like, if we're going to go big, if you're on the other side of the screen saying we need to defund police, you're obviously have an appetite for going big. You obviously have an appetite for, we need new solutions. Old solutions are not working. We are fed up. Old solutions are not working. And in that sense, I agree with you. Like, I agree with your heart on that. And I agree with anyone who just progressive, conservative. If you want brand new giant solutions, that's why I'm here. Like, that's why I enjoy having this show and enjoy having this dialogue. And that's why I think about Bitcoin a lot, is because Bitcoin is a brand new paradigm. It doesn't allow, when we say defund violence, a Bitcoin economy does not allow the same people that have a monopoly on printing money to then have a monopoly on violence. Bitcoin takes away both those monopolies and drastically, changes the world. And so think about that.
Right. Yeah. And it really does come down to the fact that there is less incentive to spend Bitcoin on superfluous things, on things that you don't actually need. And so by defunding violence, by getting easy money out of police departments and various federal departments, or even the military, it's like what we're talking about is making things absolutely necessary before you are actually going to incur that cost or that expense. And so when the communities are bearing these expenses, it's easy money, they have less of a say, right? They're being taxed to fund the batons that are later being used to beat them with.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no incentive in these government budgets. If you don't spend it, you lose it. And so you're exactly right. So the citizens' money just keeps flowing in, keeps flowing in, keeps flowing in. But the incentives on the inside are very mismatched to what do you do in your own home? You're a good budgeter and you think about every purchase, do we really need this? When it happens on the inside, hey, if we don't spend this money, it's going to be gone. So we might as well, buy a tank, might as well buy a baton, might as well do whatever. And so that's where if you take away the ability for the government to have a monopoly on the money printing and then have that flow into these bureaucratic budgets and keep having that money flow, from citizens like that, you take away the ability to kind of over militarize, some of these things.
Yes. So that's the difference between defunding violence and defunding the police.
Right. And that got deep. And like we said, we're not a news show, but it's impossible to talk about Bitcoin and it's impossible to talk about the brand new paradigm that it's creating in the world without talking about some of these, news and current events. So that's why you'll hear us, kick off with some of that. What we're going to do next is we're going to go even deeper. We're taking even deeper here. And George, and the great, teacher and explorer that he is going to talk about a concept called spiral dynamics. So talk about what are you going to share in this lesson? How's it relevant to what we just talked about?
Yeah, so spiral dynamics basically is an exploration of how human consciousness evolves. So how we begin to wake up to different aspects of the world. My guess is this is where the term sort of woke came from. It's just this idea that there are different stages and that humanity works through it at varying degrees. So check this out. It'll be like 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the second part of spiral dynamics at the end. So today I want to share a little bit about this theory called spiral dynamics, which is basically an exploration of human consciousness. And I want to share about how this relates to what we're seeing with Bitcoin and the evolution of how humans perceive value and exchange and trade. So I think the easiest way to understand spiral dynamics is to think about humanity before, all the conveniences and commodities and things that we have in the modern world. So think about like the caveman days, right? This is the beige color. This is the beige stage of human evolution and consciousness. And basically beige is marked by this need to survive, this material outlook on the world. You look around and all you know is it's you and your family and you just got to make it through the day. So you are in the beige stage of consciousness. Then what happens? Humans start figuring out things, right? They discover fire, they discover a little bit of comfort, and they move into the purple stage of consciousness. Now, the purple stage of consciousness is marked by this concern for appeasing the gods. Everything is about this mystic and mythical power that lives beyond us. And so we do a rain dance and the rain comes and it waters the crops grow, there's food and we can eat it and we are surviving, right? So after humans experience the purple stage of human consciousness, we start looking for more control in our situation. We start wondering, maybe the gods don't have this all figured out, or maybe we don't have the gods all figured out. Either way, we start reaching for control and power. And usually we did this by force. So imagine the caveman now has this club and he's like, all right, I'm going to take control of this situation by overpowering everyone else, basically. The red level of human consciousness is this need to control by force or violence. It's this idea that my will and my power is my strength. And again, it all goes back to survival. And so in the red stage of consciousness, we leverage violence and power for our strength. Color, the next stage of consciousness is blue. Blue is primarily concerned with order. They look around and the world has become violent. And it's clear that it's not really working. Sure, we've moved a step ahead of just sort of this disempowerment of waiting on the gods to help us survive. But now it's gotten a little bit out of control with all the violence. But now we need some order up in here. We need some rules, we need some regulations, we need a standard by which, or a code by which we can all live by. And so blue is concerned with creating sort of this moral compass.
Look at all these sinners.
Blue is all about discipline. It's all about being sort of the true believer. This is where you start seeing religious texts and sacred books start emerging, this need to organize people into hierarchy or caste systems or groups. That is sort of the blue worldview. After blue, we enter into the orange way of seeing the world. So orange looks at the blue and says, okay, you've created order in the world. You've quelled some violence. You've even put some of it down into writings. Fantastic. But I don't know about all these religious texts, for instance. I don't know about the source of your scripture. Is it rational? Is it logical? Does it make sense? Because if not, I don't really, doesn't really appeal to me. So after orange, we start entering into the green way of viewing the world, the green level of human consciousness. This is more sort of the postmodern approach. It's very globally centric. It's very world centric. It's about the environment. It's about political correctness. It's about tolerance. It's about good behavior unites us. So, love other people and include other people and value other people's worldviews. And so green attempts to take the data and the merit part of the modern world and sort of this age of enlightenment, and it attempts to contextualize it globally. All right, so hopefully you were tracking with me. I was trying to go through some pretty intense teachings in a short amount of time. But what I want to talk a little bit more about is green, and how a lot of the population of humans right now, I would say, are in this green stage of human consciousness, where we now have access to more information than we've ever had before, and that makes us very aware of the struggles of the world, and it creates this desire in us to be sort of inclusive, and this desire to value other people's perspectives, which is great. But what happens with green, and it's gotten this nickname, mean green is what people call it, because sometimes when you're trying to advocate for other people, you can do it in a way that doesn't really take into account the fact that not everyone is at green yet like you, and they're not ready to they're still processing their own perspectives and their own worldviews. They're not ready to process the rest of humanity. And so I think we can get really, really stuck here. And I think this is part of what we're seeing across the globe as sort of all of our issues compound.
Totally, because green turns into, I'm guilty of this too. Like I've been a part of things that don't, you feel like you're hitting the right issue, but you're not getting to the root of the problem. And what happens is the more you just kind of, I think it really feeds on itself, where you get frustrated that we're not hitting the root, You kind of know, you inherently feel it, that what starts to happen? You just start to keep arguing with other people at your level about the finer and finer details. And it turns into this like purity test of like, who can say the best things about the finer details? And then what gets left out? And talking about new people to your movement, that like gets left out all the time. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about a church or a political party or a nonprofit or just anything. Like anything that starts out as kind of a pure good intention movement can hit this like divisive stage where it's all about there's division internally and there's division externally, because it's us versus them, and then it's even like us versus us. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't allow you to think clear enough to get big solutions that the world is demanding of us.
Right. And the other thing about spiral dynamics is that as you move through the stages of consciousness, you have this tendency to look back at previous stages with disdain and disgust. You're like, ugh, I was just there 10 minutes ago, but ugh, right? And you look ahead at people who you perceive to be sort of moving faster through consciousness, or however you would describe it. You look ahead with fear. You're like, I could never defund police, right? That's going too far. And it's important to recognize that when you get to second tier consciousness after green, what happens is you begin to transcend and include. So you now recognize that every stage is actually a part of you, that you still have some red, violence in you, and you have some need for order in the blue, right? But instead of like making them fight against each other or sort of be embarrassed about the past, you found a way to now incorporate it into whatever it is you're doing moving forward. And so the second tier consciousnesses are yellow and teal,
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk a little bit more about those.
Right. No, I love that. That's like, even when you were talking to me about this the other day, it's that speaks to me a lot. They're like, Gary Vee is always like, love is the answer, or even like, that's true. Like, that's true on its face. Like, on its face. Just take away whoever's saying it. Like Jesus said this. Like, take away whoever's saying it. Take away whatever attachments you have to the type of person that's saying that.
Right.
Like, even just abstract away even me right now. Like, love others. That is a pure message. And that, like, that means meeting people where they're at and loving them, like, not judging them. And then what do? You talk to like life coaches that like teach you how to what? Bury your past and you love yourself. Like, stop saying negative things to yourself in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Like, transcend and include yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything. And then it just, like, music. You hear music all the time saying like, you know, well, it's really the journey that matters, not the destination. Mm-hmm. Like, we've kind of made all this stuff just so it's kind of just so kitschy that like we forget the true truth that's in it. So I think that's what made me think about it when you were talking about the other day, of realizing, you know, your life experience is important. You know, the past levels that you've been on are important, and you really recognize that people that have transcended, even if they like maybe seem annoying or seem like too silver lining-ish or complicit, because they're not calling out things in the exact way that you may at the green level, like true, like transcending allows you to love people that may not seem pure or may not seem lovable to yourself. And so that's what I like most about it.
Definitely. Yeah. An example of this is, even at this organization I started, Church Clarity, this is one of the things that I was attempting to convey, is this transcend and include. Is that looking at the church landscape and recognizing that people disagreed on theology. People just had different views. But what was happening was messages were being misconstrued and misunderstood. And so I said, all right, well, what if we just came to the table and said, here's what I believe, here's what you believe. Let's just be clear about it. Clarity is reasonable. But we can at least sort of include each other in whatever movement for a benevolent future looks like together. And so that was really the attempt. And so I think that's an example of one way that we can transcend and include. It's not a matter of like, you know, not having conviction.
Well, and like, I think a tenet of transcending is transparency, like you said, and being clear. And so let's relate that back to the example that we kicked the show off, like this, like defund police movement. Like a big part of where that runs into trouble is government budgets are not clear. Government budgets are the exact opposite of clear. Government money printing and then funding different departments is the exact opposite of being clear, the exact opposite of being transparent. So it doesn't, so whether you're trying to, you know, back police because you have friends that are police, or because, you know, you believe in law and order, or because of whatever, you know, there's positive things about that. Or if you believe in like defund police because you want to get rid of, you know, the negative things that are happening with this, you know, style of law enforcement, like both of those things, it's impossible. The way government budgets work, it's impossible to purely stick up for either of those things, because there's truth in both of those, but government budgets and the politicians that control them don't allow you to do it. And that's what I hear from, you know, your heart on the kind of church stuff that you've done, is that's how Bitcoin connects to this. I know that's a little bit of a jump. I like appreciate the audience like sticking with us today and going through this, you know, deep stuff on spiral dynamics. But I thought this was important. We both thought this was important because this is a big part of what's in our head while we talk about Bitcoin. Because even Bitcoin, if you listen to different people talk about Bitcoin, you may only hear one side of the story. You may only hear one dynamic. And that doesn't mean what they're saying is bad. And it doesn't mean that like, oh, you can only listen to us. Like, no, like that's like the whole tenet of like Bitcoin is like, do your own research and, you know, don't trust, verify. And that's what we're saying is what if the whole world lived on this transcend and include level, where you transcend and you have full radical transparency about the way that you operate and what it is that you believe in. And then other people are able to decide for themselves whether, you're someone worth following, or you're someone, that you demonstrate that you are happy, you demonstrate that you are free, and others are then able to adopt the same mindset and adopt the same, freedom principles that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I kind of look at Bitcoiners as a little bit of like the prophets of our day, in the sense that they've woken up to a lot of underlying realities that fuel so much division, and they've found a way to transcend all of the infighting, but also include all of the potential solutions in the proposed new money, right? And so it's fascinating because a lot of people will say things like, well, you can't care about everything, there's too many issues, there's too much injustice in the world, so you need to like focus on one thing and just. But with Bitcoin, actually you can care about everything, right? Bitcoin does fix the underlying conditions that keep humans from honest and fair and just exchange and honest weights and measures, to borrow a biblical term, right? It takes us back to this equal playing field where we can hit reset on all the injustices and all of the baggage and everything that we've brought into our present moment. And we can kind of start over with sound money, with money that actually has real value that's found in the proof of the work that it takes to generate it.
Yeah, exactly. And the Bitcoin is different than other kind of like no labels or third party like kind of arguments and like show and like, oh, well, I'm not either party, I'm an independent, like it, where a lot of those things, the reason why it's hard for all those movements are positive. The reason why a lot of those movements, it's hard to kind of gain a critical mass is because there's there's everyone's so different that there's no way to wrangle all that momentum together. Mm-hmm. When George says, focusing, like having an understanding of Bitcoin allows you to focus on all that together because you don't have to change anything else you're doing. Don't change whatever you're passionate about, we said this last week. Don't stop freedom fighting. Mm-hmm. If you're protesting in the street, don't stop. If you go to church, don't stop. If you, are like pro, Second Amendment, good at security, don't stop. Don't stop any of this stuff. If you're good at, working out and that's the way that you find freedom is because you're, staying healthy and staying with a good head, or they're, everyone who's passionate about mental health and all that stuff, don't stop any of that. Add Bitcoin to it. Add Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is a true third way. It's a true paradigm shift. Like once you start to study and learn about it, it can nail a lot of the underlying frustration that all of these dualism arguments all over the place that you find.
Mm-hmm. Amen. So with that, this is probably a good place to wrap. Thanks so much for joining us on Monday Night Bitcoin. We hope that you enjoyed it. Please shoot us a comment or an email and let us know what you thought or what questions you have, and maybe what topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes. But otherwise, we will see you next week.
Perfect. See you next Monday.
Peace.
Hey, if you made it this far, thanks for hanging out with us today. Do all the good stuff. Hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, hit the bell next to the subscribe button, and leave us a comment. Tell us where you're at in your Bitcoin journey.
Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week on Monday Night Bitcoin.